So I have a bunch of old wood and some old windows laying around in my backyard in my shed. When my wife and I bought this house, we noticed that the windows had been redone relatively recently, and they're all double-pane, double-glazed windows. So the old storm windows that used to be put up in the winter no longer actually fit on the outside of the house. So we put them in the shed and really kind of forgotten about them. But with 2020 being what it is, I realized it might not be a bad idea, living as we do in Minnesota, to have a greenhouse in the backyard. So when I got to thinking about the amount of glass that I would need to make a greenhouse, I remembered these windows in the shed and thought to myself, I wonder what other lumber and such I can find around the house and around the property, less than a quarter of an acre. Is there any way that I could cobble something together? And sure enough, with over 10 square feet of glass and some 4x4s that I found behind the shed, a pallet that we had laying around, some 2x4s and 2x3s that were in the top of the garage when we bought the place, there's actually a fair amount of lumber around here and supplies that I could use to make this happen. So, in my backyard, I gathered what supplies I had, slowly but surely, started pulling things together, and came up with a very rough outline of the plan. Here you can see me starting to frame in the exterior of the greenhouse, and then start putting the windows up. It was at this point that I realized that this was actually going to work. You see, the 45th parallel is literally 500 feet from our backyard, so, putting the windows at a 45-degree angle works really well. So, front elevation on the bottom there is about 2 feet. Back elevation is just about 6 feet, be about 5 feet 8 inches. I'm about 5'7", so I'm not quite hitting my head on that. So I'm guessing that's about 6 feet, if I remember correctly. And so now you can see that we've actually got some windows in place. Now we had some of the cement board laying around, originally in the garage, and later, after I moved it, in the shed. And I think this was left over from when the kitchen and the bathroom were redone several years before we bought the house. We have about 8 sheets of the stuff. It's about half-inch thick concrete board, and I believe it's 3 feet by 5 feet. So this worked perfectly for these just over 4 foot long walls on the sides. So here you can see me putting those panels up and using those as my rough exterior. Now the panels are screwed in to the exterior frame, and now it's time to cut down another panel. So I do that with a utility knife and just a piece of 4x4 I have laying around. And so now I've got these 2 triangles that I'm able to attach to the exterior sides. Hold those in place with a couple of clamps, drywall screws, and put them in place. Worked pretty well. So now those are in, and I've got my side walls. I've got this side that I really want to just take the piece off. Unfortunately, taking that amount of concrete board off, it's actually a little bit hard to do. I'm lucky that I realized later that I could just use a wood saw and finish it off. But anyway, now I've got to make an interior support for the back wall, especially since that's going to be where the door is on the back of the greenhouse. In the meantime, I just had a couple of pieces of plywood laying up in front, and I'd been putting the chickens in sometimes to try and kill off some of the grass. Putting the lag bolts in from the top in this case to make certain that's fully secured. So now it's a matter of shimming that so that we will not have an issue with the door. Now it's a lot of adjustment to try and get the door just right. As you can see, it takes a lot of trial and error. Now it's time to put shell on the back, just a couple of pieces more of concrete board now, and so I can get those put in. I gotta say that the screws I was using, every so often on the exterior of the concrete board, they would just lose their tip completely. And I'm really not certain whether it's just that there's more adhesive being used in there or what. Alright, so now it's time to put the chickens back in momentarily. And there they are, pecking away at the grass, trying to get the floor cleaned up a little bit before I put the gravel in later on. But the girls did a very good job, eventually, pecking away at the grass. Right, so now, another day, another bit of infrastructure, more work on the door, mainly. So it's just a matter of 2 hinges on the sides there. And mount that up in the middle there. Opens and closes just fine. I've got a piece of plywood that's just the right size to go in over the top. So let's take a look from the inside now. Now we're moving over to the electrical subsystem. See, I want this thing to be not only solar powered, but I want to be able to have everything from pumped water inside to a couple of fans that I'm going to use to do the cooling for the greenhouse as well. Now we're going to skip over to some insulation. There's a great deal of great stuff involved in the making of this greenhouse to seal all the various cracks and such. And so that's also how I took care of all of the gaps in the interior. There's loads and loads of spray foam. Alright, and then as a backing behind the rest of insulation that I'll eventually put up in the next episode of this, I'm going to put up some roll insulation that I have laying around down the basement. Total investment on the greenhouse at this point in time is less than $50. It was just some screws that I needed to get, and I think 1 new driver bit. Other than that, everything else was something that I had laying around. Even the aluminum tape was something that I had laying about, and I also had some pieces of ceiling tile for drop ceilings that you'll eventually see me putting up as the interior walls, or inner portion of the interior walls. As you can tell, I'm doing a little bit more foam insulation here. That kind of dropped in from the top outside. And so it's just a matter of buttoning up the interior to get this as insulated as humanly possible. Then after insulating, it's just a matter of trying to get the board on the front there so that the bottom front actually has something being held in place as an exterior wall. At this point I started really seeing that the whole structure would actually hold a lot of heat. And at one point, I think in this phase, we got up to about 123 degrees Fahrenheit inside, and that was while it was, I think, 83 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So there I am working into the sunset, and that's going to be the end of part 1 for now. Hope you enjoyed.